The talk tonight is about the current and ongoing efforts to adopt dam safety rules in the state of Vermont. So I just want to start with a brief presentation overview. First, thanks to Corey and Marie for the concept of this presentation and of doing this. Initially, when we talked, it was a while back, and we talked about doing this in person. And obviously, COVID disallows such things now. So here we are online. But I was glad that we were able to deliver this presentation to everybody. The agenda tonight, I'm going to spend a little bit of time doing a quick background on dam safety nationally and dam safety in Vermont, and also talk about how the dam safety rulemaking kind of came to be here. Talk about some of the key changes that the new rules bring to the table, including looking at things like dam owner obligations, responsibilities. There's a dam recording requirement, some annual fee requirements, hazard potential classification changes from kind of the way things used to be done, a new way that we look at and plan inspections in terms of scheduling and compliance, and also emergency actions. All of that is under the administrative portion of the rule that came to be August 1st of this year. And then we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going next, and that's the phase 2 part of the rule, and that's the quote unquote standards part of the rule. Also like to, after that, talk a little bit about available resources and planned future trainings about around dam safety related things. And then at the end, obviously do some questions. As I go through this, if there's something germane to what we're talking about at that time, and you type the question in, talk to Corey, and as long as we're on time, we can stop and answer questions along the way. I don't mind that at all. So with that, we'll get started. This is just a plug for our website. The link for it is there at the top. This is the State Dam Safety's website. I only provide this because this is where we posted all of the information during the phase 1 part of the rulemaking, and where we will be posting the information as we move through to the phase 2 part of the rulemaking. And I point out just 2 key links on there. One of the links is our state statute, which was what was updated in 2018. And the second link I point out here is our current administrative dam safety rules that came into being in August of this year. And under that new draft dam safety rule, that is the area where we were posting updates throughout the rulemaking process, and we'll continue to do so. So this is just kind of a place to kind of monitor as we move forward for the most up-to-date information. So backing out here a little bit and kind of trying to start from the beginning by giving a very brief history of dam safety in the United States. That just seems like an appropriate place to start. This is a slide I've used in previous presentations before, but I think it's just important to kind of set the foundation. There's been, dams have been built in the country since the inception of our country, and there's been dam incidences and dam failures, and there's been responses to that through dam legislation, and it's still ongoing today as it is here in Vermont. On this time chart here, I start with just the first major dam failure in the country, and one of still the deadliest to this day, and that is 1889, the failure of the South Forks Dam in Pennsylvania, claimed over 2,200 lives. It was during that late 1800s, that was really the advent of more major dam building in the country, and where many instances and failures unfortunately occurred, as at that time there was really no standards around dam building. And not all the mechanics of dam safety were really well understood. You need to fast forward many years to the 60s and 70s before legislation really at the national level started to realize this was a problem and combat it. In 1972, we had our National Dam Safety Inspection Act, followed by 1975, the National Inventory of Dams was developed, and that's something that still is maintained today by the Army Corps of Engineers. That national inventory is fed by state programs like Vermont, and updated on a yearly basis. In the late 70s and early 80s, federal dam safety guidelines were developed and enacted, and state governments were encouraged to enact state dam safety programs. In 1985, the Association of State Dam Safety Officials came to be. That's an association, all of the states that have dam safety programs, which is every state except for Alabama, are members of the association, and it's a way that we all share information around dam safety. And here we are, 2020 today, and Vermont's we're working on our rules. So I guess many strides have been made in dam safety, and most of those strides, unfortunately, are due to dam failures instances, and it continues to be today. I listed out some just a few dam failures in this blue chart here at the bottom of the slide. And one of the things a couple of things I want folks to take away from that. Just the first one listed here is the Mill River Dam failure that happened in Massachusetts in 1874. That was 139 deaths, and that remains to this day the most deadly dam disaster in New England. But many of these others that I list, as we go down the chart, the year it gets more recent, and I just kind of like to point to the fact that you're looking deaths in the hundreds, and then as you get down to the most recent one, the Sanford and Edenville dams, and it just failed this year in Michigan, no deaths. And that's just a huge contrast from the number of deaths that these failures that were even occurring through the 70s had. And a large reason for that is the advent of dam safety legislation, standards around dam construction, emergency action planning, and other initiatives that were all kind of come together. So, and then I'll just bring it a little bit closer to home. A brief history of Vermont dams and dam safety. I just included on here a few dam failures and some major dam building events that went on in Vermont, and then kind of where we are today. So in 1852, there's a failure of the Lake Perrin Dam in Bennington. That's a dam that actually was rebuilt and still stands to this day. That dam had one loss of life due to the failure. As I understand from reading the records, there's actually good evacuation that was performed for that dam failure. In 1923, the Harriman Dam was built down your way. At the time that dam was built, it was one of the largest, or the largest, earth embankment dam in the world. Obviously that was fairly quickly surpassed, but it's pretty neat that happened here in the state of Vermont. Still active today as a hydropower dam. And then the 1927 flood, we had numerous small dams fail, or many dams period fail throughout the state. That flood resulted in over 80 deaths. It's hard to say if how many of those 80 deaths were attributed to dam failures as opposed to the flood themselves, but still it was a very major event. In response to that 27 flood, the 1930s, the Winooski River flood control dams were built, and that includes Waterbury, Wrightsville, and East Barry. Let's see, and then moving forward again, this is probably the last fairly major dam failure in the state was in 1947, the East Pittsford Dam failed. And when that dam failed, there was no loss of life. That one, luckily, that it was going to fail, and a lot of evacuation happened, but over 160 homes were flooded, so it was a pretty major failure. Following that in the 50s and 60s was a pretty big dam building era. In the Connecticut River Valley in particular, the flood control dams were built by the Army Corps of Engineers that exist today. That includes Union Village, North Heartland, North Springfield, Townsend, and Ball Mountain. In 1981, Chapter 43 was enacted. As you probably remember from the previous slide, it was in the late 70s and early 80s when state governments were encouraged to develop their own dam safety programs, and this was sort of Vermont's response to that. There was some dam safety work going on in Vermont previous to 1981. It was under the Water Resources Board, a different group that no longer exists. They did actually issue permits or orders for dam construction and do some inspection work. So, and I've seen inspection reports from back to the 50s. So there was a little bit of dam safety work going on even before it kind of hit the national radar. Obviously, 2011, we had Tropical Storm Irene. Thankfully, we had no major dam failures, no significant or high hazard dams failed, although we did lose many small dams throughout the state. And then 2018, Act 161 passed that enacted dam safety rulemaking authority for the first time upon the Chapter 43 state statute. And as part of that rulemaking authority, it required that we adopt rules in a phased approach. Phase one, or the administrative rules, were due in 2020. Those are now on the books. And in 2022, standards rules are due. And those are what we're starting to work on now. So hopefully that kind of sets the stage. This is another slide that I think folks who perhaps have been to my presentations before have seen, but it's just important for folks to realize that in the state of Vermont, and this is not unusual across different states, that there's several different regulators that regulate dam safety within our state and within many states. But within our state in particular, I work for the Department of Environmental Conservation, and we regulate non-hydropower, non-federal dams. So if the dam has a hydropower unit that puts power out to the grid, or if it's owned by the federal government, we don't regulate it, but we essentially regulate all the other dams, and that's the majority of the dams in the state. Also at the state level, we have the Public Utility Commission, and they regulate hydropower dams constructed before 1935, and that's about 20 dams. For other power dams built after 1935, and that's about 80 of them, are regulated at the federal level, so the state doesn't have any dam safety regulatory jurisdiction. They're regulated by the FERC, or FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And like I said, there's about 80 of those dams. And then lastly, federal dams are essentially self-regulating. I have listed here the United States Army Corps of Engineers because there's a prominent one in Vermont. But if a dam is owned by a federal entity such as the Army Corps of Engineers, they self-regulate. They're not regulated at the state level. So there's 4 dam safety regulation agencies within the state, and none of us really overlap, but it can cause some confusion. And so moving on to the dam inventory, I tried to kind of break up somewhat so folks can get an idea of numbers, how many dams each group regulates. Excuse me. So our dam inventory is mirrored on the Natural Resource Atlas. I'm not sure if folks are familiar with that, but the link is here. And under the Rivers tab, there's a dams layer, and you can turn that layer on, and on the atlas, on the online map, it brings up a diamond, a location of every known dam in the state. And admittedly, there are many dams, small dams not on the atlas, but the majority of the large dams are. The atlas includes over 1,100 records. It does include historic sites, so it does include some dam removal sites or sites of historic dams that are long gone. So that's how many records it has. Let's see. So under the full jurisdiction of my program, the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, we say there's about 413 dams. And those are dams that by our state statute impound greater than 500,000 cubic feet of water. And that's kind of a cardinal number in our statute. If you include all the dams that are within our jurisdiction, including the small ones, it's closer to probably 1,000 in total, maybe like 900, and counting, because as I said, that are not in the inventory and not necessarily on our radar. And that's with the 570 below that comes in the partial jurisdiction. I haven't broken out by hazard classification here. I'll explain a little bit more about what that means later. But as you can see, the majority of the dams in the state are actually regulated by the DEC. And then below that, the PUC and FERC, the power dams in the state. There's about 100 power dams, and I believe the split's about 80 FERC and 20 Public Utility Commission. And then there's about 15 federal owned dams in the state, regulated dams in the state. So the Vermont dam inventory is kind of like a live inventory. We're always updating it. We're always adding dams, trying to improve the information that goes into it. The atlas is a very forward-facing portion of it. That we have on the I guess you probably can't see my cursor, but here on the bottom right is one of the pages out of the atlas. It's an access database, and we track a lot of information in our database regarding the dams in the inventory.
And there's a quick question.
Sure.
Are those the old classifications, or are those the new classifications, or did they change?
Those are the current classifications. As of today, the classification definitions have changed, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But the current definitions as they stood before the rule went into place are being adopted as the current definitions. As we go through the inventory and inspect each of the dams over time, they'll be compared to the new definition and adjusted appropriately. So it's the current definition, or the current classification that we have, and there are going to be some changes as we move forward. So quickly, an overview of my program. I think Corey already mentioned this. We're located in the Water Investment Division in DEC. We're very small. We only have 2 full-time engineers. Our mission is different than many of those in A&R and DEC. We primarily focus on public safety relative to dams. We administer 10 VSA Chapter 43, and again, non-federal, non-power dams is our area. We act as owners, regulators, and engineers, and we perform tasks including inspections. We have a dam registration program. Dams, new construction, alterations, and removal of dams have to be permitted through our program if they are of a certain size. We have the inventory that we just talked about. We do, as well, and on top of that, we also operate and maintain 14 state-owned dams, including the 3 Winooski River flood control dams. So, the legislation, Chapter 43. Chapter 43 has been around since the early 80s. It's legislation that guides the regulation of dams at the state level. Chapter 43 actually applies to both the DEC and the PUC, although the rules that we're going to talk about today only apply to the DEC. Some of the main takeaways are listed here. It's a pretty basic and general statute. And frankly, before we had rules, it was all we had to operate off of. So Basically, we had the statute and then a bunch of informal policies based on federal dam safety guidance that we had fought with, and that's how we had regulated dams till before this rule came into place. Kind of an antiquated approach to dam safety, and as we move forward into the rulemaking process and get them completed in 2022, we'll kind of be more up to the federal standard and as well as the standard of our surrounding states. But again, the statute provides for the jurisdiction bifurcation between DEC and PUC. And again, the difference is power producing dams. It requires the authorization permits through an application for dams that impound more than 500,000 cubic feet. And that's about 11.5 acre feet. And an acre foot is 1 acre. So it's about 208 feet by 208 feet, 1 foot deep. That's an acre foot. And it's just a simple way to talk about very large numbers in terms of cubic feet in a smaller, in terms of a smaller number. So you basically divide 500,000 cubic feet by 43,560 to get your units in acre feet. Other takeaways are public good there's public good criteria that we evaluate different things in addition to dam safety as part of determining an application meets the public good or not. We perform dam inspections, and it provides requirements around how that gets done, and it also has a requirement around unsafe dams and how we handle kind of the worst of the worst. So as it was alluded to earlier, in 2018, the statute underwent pretty significant updates. So how did the...
Sorry, one more question.
Sure.
Do you or does someone at DEC inspect dams that are owned by other state agencies like Fish and Wildlife?
Yes. Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. No problem. Yeah, we inspect generally those dams in our purview, non-power, non-federal, and the ownership groups. It varies: municipal, private, state-owned. We inspect all those. It's not independent of. It's independent, not dependent on owner type. So how did this dam safety rule come to pass in Vermont? Well, that pre-existing law, Chapter 43, it gave us very limited authorities. As I said, we had no authority to make dam safety rules. We kind of fell behind the times in terms of meeting national dam safety standards. So we were kind of falling behind the times in terms of dam safety in Vermont. We didn't have much regulatory capacity to improve the condition and the safety of dams in the state through that statute. We also started to lag behind our surrounding states. Certainly, here in New England and New York, we're catching up now pretty quickly, but we were a bit behind them in terms of dam safety process and legislation. As a common problem across the country, much of the inventory dam inventory is aging, and there's also an increasing number of dams that don't really serve a purpose. There's a lot of old mill dams, particularly in this area of the country, that perhaps had a purpose 100 years ago, 50 years ago, but today don't really serve a useful purpose. So between the aging inventory in general, fewer new dams are being built, and so our inventory is getting older, and so they're becoming higher risk for dam incidences and failures. So that was another driving factor. And then, as the rulemaking was started, we developed the rules with the help of an interest group. That was basically a microcosm of the dam safety community. We had representatives of dam owners, representatives of the dam removal community, of engineering consultants, and of other state and federal regulatory agencies. And they were kind of a guiding group as we put together our first set of rules. We'll probably use a similar group for the second part of the rules. And then we kind of culminated the rule development with a workshop last fall in 2019. We presented it in Montpelier. Hopefully some of your folks were able to attend that. It was a full day event, and we plan to actually kind of do a 2.0 of that in the future here as we kind of wrap up the phase 2 part of the rules. So what changed in Chapter 43? A couple of benign things. We added a purpose statement. A definition of a dam was added. Believe it or not, despite the amount of time the statute was around regulating dams, there never was a definition for what a dam was. It required that dams just not be inspected, but be inspected according to a schedule. It required that we assess hazard classifications of dams. Now, this was something that had been happening for years on an informal basis, but this makes it a requirement that we do this. And it gave us 4 hazard classification types: high, significant, and low, which are high, significant, and low are essentially federal standard, and then minimal is one that was added and somewhat unique to Vermont, but not necessarily unique in its entirety. Many states have a kind of 4th category. The statute also required an inventory be developed, updated, and published on the A&R Atlas, and that is something that already exists, but this kind of gives us the impetus to continue to improve it and hopefully take it to the next level. It required that dam owners register their dams in the land records, and that's an entirely new requirement that kind of was born out of the fact that in many cases we had transactions happening, dams being bought or dams being sold, and people not realizing that they were purchasing dams, and so it led to a lot of confusion about who the owners were and what the requirements were for the dam and whether or not they even owned it. And so by requiring over time that all dams be registered in the land records, any property attorney doing a due diligence search will hit the fact that there is a dam on the property, and not hopefully eliminate a lot of the confusion that had kind of been fairly prominent in some cases. And I guess probably the biggest one here is it gave us rulemaking authority, both administrative and standard rules. So here's just kind of a quick rundown of the two rule sets of what the administrative and design standard rules are. As I said, the phase 1 rules were adopted in 2020. And they included those things listed there, and we'll go into each of those a bit more detail. And then the phase 2 rules, which we're trying to get working on here very soon, requires design standards around siting, design, construction, operation and maintenance, inspection, around application for permitting and emergency action planning, which is a big one. So, our rule package is really only like halfway done at this time, and it won't really be until 2022 when we have a full rule package. And this has been our rulemaking schedule, our Gantt chart we built when we started. It's hard to believe we're more than halfway through, but just kind of give you a sense for, these are the tasks on the left that we've been attacking as we've been going through this, and the big red arrow kind of shows where we are today, and kind of where we're heading. So as I said, I think it's the blue, I guess it's the yellow squares on the right, on the bottom right there. That's kind of our second public meeting that we hope to hold, similar to that workshop we held last year in Montpelier. We hope to do something very similar to that. Basically a notification presentation of the phase 2 rules with a bunch of dam safety education opportunities for everybody. So that's upcoming, dates not yet planned. So let's dive into the administrative rules here a little bit. We're going to talk about rules, and that can be a little bit dry. I'll try to do my best to keep moving through here. So the definitions of a definition section in the rule is first section you come to essentially. And as I said, we went for many years without the definition of a dam, and now we have one. And this is it. And it's a lot of words to type on a slide, and I apologize for that. But basically, a dam is any artificial barrier that impounds water. So it's very inclusive. And basically the way that we really regulate or determine whether a dam is a dam or not is through what a dam is not. I'm just going to switch the page to that. A dam shall not mean, and here's a list of all the things dams are not. So first one here is wildlife infrastructure. Beaver dams are not dams. Transportation infrastructure that has no normal water storage capacity and only compounds water during storm events are not dams. So that would be things like roadway culverts, roadway bridges, railroad culverts, etc. An artificial barrier, number 3, an artificial barrier, a stormwater management structure regulated by A&R under Chapter 47. Those are simply stormwater ponds, and those are regulated by stormwater, and those are exempt from this rule. Elevated underground storage tanks used for agricultural waste. Basically, agricultural waste tanks and manure pits are exempt from this rule. As are number 5, above or below grade tanks, vessels, or storage containers. Steel and concrete construction used to store wastewater. And so those are like large wastewater detention tanks are exempt from this rule. The next one, dug ponds created by excavating below grade and constructed without artificial barriers or outlet structures which pose no threat to life, property, lifelines, and the environment downstream. So, dug ponds and backyards and things like that, as long as there's not a physical barrier that's built above the natural grade and everything's kind of built below grade into the ground, they're exempt out of this rule. Any structure related to a wastewater treatment facility, excluding wastewater ponds and lagoons. So wastewater ponds and lagoons are included in this rule, and they technically always kind of have been under our purview, but this clarifies that point. And then lastly, levees. Fortunately, in Vermont, we don't have very many levees, but the few that we do have are exempt from this rule as well. So the next section of the rule I'd like to talk about is just applicability, and I just want to be very clear about what this rule applies to and what it doesn't apply to. As I said, the rule basically applies to all non-power, non-federal dams in the state. So what's out? Power dams, federally owned dams, and dams regulated by the Public Utility Commission. All other dams are in one way or another, and there's different levels of how regulated the dams are going to be. But one question we hear a lot about is people reference back to that 500,000 cubic foot impoundment threshold and ask if dams that are smaller than that are exempted from this rule, and the answer is no, they're not, and they actually never have been. They've always been included in the rule, but typically the small dams are less that small, typically less hazardous, so get considerably less attention and need less attention. So they're held more arm's length than some of the larger high hazard dams. So just to clarify that point and to hopefully answer some of those questions folks may have. So if you have a dam that impounds less than 500,000 cubic feet, while you are regulated under the rule, you do not need an order or permit to construct it, alter it, or remove it. And that's through the dam safety program. That doesn't mean that that's not all permits. So other state and potentially federal permits may apply, but you don't actually need a state dam safety permit to build, alter, or remove a sub 500,000 cubic foot dam. Secondly, a sub 500,000 cubic foot dam has no annual registration fee requirement at this time. And otherwise, all other rule requirements apply. So eventually, owners of sub 500,000 cubic foot dams will be required to record their dam in the land records. Actually, I have inspections here, but that's not entirely true. It depends on the hazard classification. If you have a very small, low hazard dam, there'll be no inspection requirement. If you have a significant or high hazard, very small dam, then there will be an inspection requirement. And you will have to meet the compliance. You will have to comply with inspection results. And then, again, the standards are still kind of out there, but there will be standards around dam construction. And while you don't need a permit to build the dam, there will be requirements on how dams should be built. And so the dam will need to be built to a certain set of standards, which will, depending on the hazard class, may be fairly straightforward, but nonetheless. Another section of the rule tries to lay out the dam owner obligation and responsibility under the rule. This isn't necessarily all of the requirements that a dam owner or all of the responsibilities a dam owner may have, but it is the requirements under this particular rule. And we were very careful with that language when the rules were written. But the owner is ultimately responsible for the safe management and operation of their dam. They're responsible for the significant financial undertaking required of dam ownership, and they're responsible for cooperation with our department. So it's also, to me, be clear, rule compliance doesn't necessarily relieve owner from all liability. Also, being a dam, impounding water is at its root a potentially hazardous activity, and so dam owners do need to understand that that they are responsible. If a dam fails and causes damage downstream, they can be responsible, and typically the way they're made responsible is through lawsuits from downstream affected parties back to the owner, and it turns into a litigious thing, and it's far from straightforward. But in general, owners are responsible for the water they impound and for the damage that it can create if it really is released in an uncontrolled way, either through a dam failure or through misoperation of a dam. Moving on, dam recording in the land records. Talked a little bit about this before, but basically the purpose of this is to inform present and future dam owners of the presence of dams on the property and the legal responsibilities associated with dam ownership. And I have a lot of text here about the process of how it's going to work. We have not started this process yet, but in short, we'll be reaching out to dam owners. Dam owners aren't required to do anything until they hear from us. So we'll be reaching out to dam owners, requesting that they follow this process to register their dam record their land in the dam in the land records. There'll be some back and forth between us and the owner, and then ultimately it'll end up being a recording in the land records in the town where the dam is located, and that will kind of signify compliance with this requirement. There's a few funny things. Multiple owners will have one recording form per owner. Dams at bridge towns will have to be recorded in multiple towns, so that will be slightly complicated. And transfers. So anytime there's a sale of the dam, we're supposed to be notified, and the new owner is supposed to get a new dam record certificate, so that over time it helps us to track who the owner is, so we can reach out to these people to do things like schedule inspections. If there is an emergency, we know who owns what and who to contact, and so that makes our inventory more up to date and better track of these things than we can currently keep. Another element of the administrative rules is the annual dam registration. This is actually not a new requirement. This was enacted in 2016, but the current rulemaking clarifies some of the details around the process. But kind of as it stands, as it continues to stand, is that dams that impound greater than 500,000 cubic feet are subject to this annual fee, and it's by hazard classification. High hazard dams are $1,000 a year. Significant hazard dams are $350 a year, and low hazard dams are $200 a year. Not the most wildly popular program, but it does go to fund part of our program. And we've also found it useful from the standpoint that it does allow us another opportunity for outreach to dam owners. And here's an example of our dam inventory page where we track payment of registration fees. Okay, so dam hazard classifications. This is somewhat new ground, yet we've had dam hazard classifications for many years. And just to start with some basic definition here, hazard potential is the potential for adverse incremental consequences that could result from failure or misoperation of a dam. So when you consider the hazard classification of a dam, it almost entirely has to do with what is located downstream of the dam. It's independent of condition and has to do with the potential impact the dam could have if it were to fail, on potential for loss of life, potential for damage to property downstream, potential to cause issues with lifelines, and that can be things like critical routes, critical access routes, critical roads. It can be utilities like power, water, sewer, and things like that. And then lastly, also damage to the environment is another way that the hazard classification is going to be evaluated moving forward. As I said, it's unrelated to dam condition. And so hazard classifications are very important. It helps us to classify dams. It's a very simple risk-based way to kind of understand the risk the dam poses to the public. From a high hazard dam that potentially could result in loss of life if it were to fail, to a lower minimal hazard dam, a lower minimal hazard dam that would result in perhaps really little to no damage downstream should it fail. Hazard classifications will be determined by the department, noted in the dam inventory, and dam hazard classifications are also kind of a live classification. They can change over time. As development changes downstream, hazard classifications can change. As more homes are built downstream, what was a low hazard dam can become a high hazard dam over time. To no real fault of the dam owner. It's kind of one of the unfortunate consequences of being a dam owner, is people can make changes downstream that greatly impact you, and you don't have much control over that, unfortunately. But that's sort of the name of the game.
And there was a question, I think this was going back a couple, but does benefit include historic or aesthetic or audible?
Does benefit? I'm sorry.
Kevin, do you want to unmute yourself and elaborate?
Yeah, it's actually a question from Sharon on the Planning Commission, but I think it has to do with the dam being a historic structure, and the audible part is people like hearing the water, I think, coming over the dam. And what was the other?
Also, it's considered scenic.
Considered scenic, yeah.
The question is, does that play into the hazard classification?
No, the question goes back to, is that considered a benefit of a dam?
Under the public good criteria?
Yeah.
Yeah, if that was a local cultural resource, that would probably be considered under the public good criteria.
Thank you.
From the standpoint of, yeah, okay. Okay, so hazard classifications continue. There's a lot of words on a slide. I don't like to put a lot of words on a slide, but I wasn't very good about that in this presentation. But so here are the hazard classifications on the left: high, significant, low, and minimal. And the first column to the right is the adopted definition, and the definition, and the column to the right is the pre-existing definition. And so, as I said, we used to use Army Corps guidance from 1978, I believe, was the definitions for high, significant, low that we used, and we used up through August of this year. Those definitions were very relevant at the time of writing, but even by the mid 2000s, those definitions were kind of behind the times a bit. And so we used the opportunity of this rule to adopt the go from 1978 Corps guidance to I think 2015 is the most recent recommendations from the Army Corps of Engineers. So we basically adopted the current Army Corps hazard classification guidance. And so I just want to quickly go through some of the main differences here. So the high hazard dam, the adopted definition is a dam where failure misoperation will probably cause loss of life. So just one life can make a dam a high hazard, and that's the kind of the industry standard at this time. If you go to the pre-existing definition in red there, it was the loss of more than a few lives. And so that was kind of interpreted loosely by us and others as 2 inhabited structures or 2 homes and roughly 6 lives. So in the past, you could have a dam that, if it were to fail, we would think would cause loss of life of potentially 2 homes. That would have been called a significant hazard dam. Under the current definitions, those are going to become high hazard dams. So that's one significant change. As we move down to the significant level, the current definition is no probable loss of life. Again, if there's any probable loss of life, it's automatically high. The pre-existing definition on the right did allow for a few loss of lives. So this is one change where we're likely going to have in our inventory as we start to really cycle through it. We're going to have some significance that may end up going to the high hazard category. Low hazard dams, the definitions are fairly similar. One thing that's added and mentioned in the current definition that wasn't considered in the older definition is environmental losses. And so that's something, a new consideration in these hazard classification definitions. And then lastly, minimal hazard is something that wasn't currently used in our pre-existing system, and it's something that we're using in this new system. And basically, if you have a small dam that impounds less than 500,000 cubic feet, and it would be considered a low hazard, meaning that failure or misoperation results in no probable loss of life and low to no economic or environmental losses, the dam would be called a minimal hazard. And essentially, minimal hazards dams have very few standards that will need to be met. There'll be no inspection requirement. There'll be much lesser requirements than the high significant and low hazard dams. So it's kind of a way to identify the very low risk, small low risk dams and try not to overregulate them. Here's a table that just provides some more information about the different hazard classifications and kind of how each possible loss type is considered. Likely we're going to be developing some fact sheets that are kind of independent of the rule that provide further guidance on these points, but this was again adopted from the Army Corps of Engineers, and this very table is an Army Corps of Engineers table that provides just some further guidance into how the hazard classifications are going to be determined moving forward. So I guess from there we'll move on to inspection and inspection schedule. So our program for many years has run an informal optional inspection program. As part of that program, we would reach out to dam owners at the state, municipal, and private level, all different owner types. We'd contact them, request permission to perform an inspection. People could turn us down, and we wouldn't simply inspect that dam. There was no requirement that they join the program and have their dam inspected. And we would ultimately strive to develop a report of conditions, send it to the owner, and help them better understand their dam and better understand the risk associated with their dam, and provide recommendations on things they could do to improve the condition. So our goal is to kind of keep that as intact as we could. Where we have trouble is that as a 2-person program, we have a very hard time inspecting the number of dams that we need to inspect and getting those reports out. We struggle a lot. So realizing our relatively small our small number of staff, it became pretty obvious that we needed the ability to have some assistance with this. So one change is that the dam safety inspection program is going to continue. However, we now have the authority to either perform the inspection ourselves or to require that the owner hire an engineer to perform the inspection. So that's entirely new. Never in the past have we required the owners hire engineers to perform inspections. But again, it really became a capacity issue, and as to why we had to include that in our rule. So inspection types, we also defined a bunch of different inspection types, and a couple of them are new. This first one in the list here is periodic, and that's essentially the inspections that we've performed for many years. They're either to be performed by us at the department or an engineer hired by the owner. They're to be done at the frequency in the table here, which is for a high hazard dam every 2 years, for a significant hazard dam every 5 years, and a low hazard dam every 10. And again, a minimal hazard has no inspection requirement. And in the event that we are unable to perform the inspection as we build our inspection schedule for the next year, we have to inform owners that we would like to hire an engineer and give them essentially 6 months notice to have that done. So I think in theory, the way that would be done is in the wintertime, as we're developing our schedule, we determine the dams that we think we can get to and the dams we're not gonna be able to get to, and send notices to those owners. And certainly initially here, help them through the process of getting an engineer on board and starting those programs. This is another requirement that owners don't need to worry about until contacted by us. So there's no date that onsets this requirement. It's required basically when we contact you and say an inspection is required. And we are looking at, the last time an inspection was done at the dam, kind of using the current schedule of frequency, 2, 5, and 10 years to kind of gauge when the next one's going to be and kind of move forward as we have in the past. But basically once we've done an inspection under this new program, that truly starts the clock. And a high hazard dam would have to be done at least 2 years later, significant every 5 years, and the low every 10. Other types of dam inspections that are considered in the rule are non-periodic inspections, and these are inspections that are basically the same scope as the periodic, a visual inspection in the field that kind of looks at the major elements of the dam, and then provides a condition rating and some basic recommendations. But non-periodic inspections are done outside of that interval and that table in the previous slide. So it may be done, non-periodic inspection may be done because the owner may request one. It may be done because there's a new or unusual loading condition or a large storm event comes through, or something that has changed that seems to make it worthy to have another inspection done kind of outside of the normal frequency. So that's non-periodic inspection. We define inventory inspections. And these are inspections that are essentially only done to collect information so that the dam can either be added to the dam inventory or the information in the inventory can be improved upon. We have construction inspections. Those are inspections that are done during work on a dam to check compliance with plan specifications in the dam order. And then lastly, we have comprehensive inspections. And this is a new concept. This comprehensive inspection requirement was something that is kind of somewhat even newer to the national dam safety community. It was really born out of the Oroville Dam incident. And what it is it's an inspection, a much more detailed inspection that's done at a much less frequency that kind of goes back to the drawing board and kind of looks at the dam soup to nuts, much more detailed than just a superficial visual inspection. And considers a lot of different elements and kind of provides a lot better project documentation. And so these are required only for high and significant hazard dams. They're not going to be required for lows. And they're required on a 10-year basis for high hazard dams and 15-year basis for significance. And these inspections would be required to be done by an engineer hired by the owner. So like I said, that's a pretty significant change to nothing like this was ever required in the past. Some other information about our inspection schedule, part of our rule, the individual inspection request. There's a allowance in the rule for an interested person to come to the department and request that an inspection be done on a dam. And then there's actually a formal process now for which that can be done, that can be documented. Basically, the owner puts in, the person who's requesting the inspection puts in the request. We kind of explore the request a little bit. If we agree an inspection is warranted, we'll reach out to the dam owner and proceed accordingly. And lastly, included in the rule is this department permission for entry for inspections. It says owner shall allow department access at reasonable times to access the property to perform inspections. In Vermont, state employees, we're not allowed to enter private property unless given permission by the owner. So we will never just show up and do an inspection without owners expecting us coming or without getting at least verbal permission to do so. In the event that we're denied permission in the past, we would just move on because our program was optional. Well, now that the inspection program is mandatory, if we're denied access, we have the authority now through this provision to request an access order at the state level and eventually get access that way if we need it. So. Moving on, compliance with inspection results. So this is another fairly significant change from our old way of doing business. In the past, we'd go out, we'd inspect dams for owners, we'd develop a report, or we'd talk in the field and give them recommendations, but we had no way to require the owners to take any of those recommendations up. We would, sometimes we'd plead, sometimes we'd really suggest strongly this would be a good idea for you to consider. In some cases, we were successful. In other cases, we weren't, because we really had no authority to require them to take action. So it did kind of tend to, in some case, fester a condition where owners would not take the action until essentially we got so far down the road and so close to an unsafe condition that it was an untenable situation. So the compliance with inspection result provision allows for us to, as we make recommendations, if there's very important ones in there, we can actually require that the dam owner undertake those recommendations, or at least address those requirements and recommendations in the reports. And that will likely be done through, we'll do an inspection, or receive an inspection from a consultant. We'll review it. If we feel there's conditions in there that are recommendations that need to be performed by the owner, they'll be given a letter and a timetable to develop a plan to address it, and then we'll work with them to hopefully be able to work with them to, over time to address those conditions. Okay, and then moving on, administrative rules. The administrative rules also cleaned up a little bit how emergency actions are handled at dams. In the past, there was some confusion around this, and hopefully this section eliminated a lot of that confusion. But at the end of the day, if you own a dam, you have the primary responsible for determining when an emergency involving your dam exists. For dam owners that are of high and significant hazard dams, that will eventually have emergency action plans, or already have emergency action plans. Once an emergency condition exists, it's your responsibility to start that chain of communication in the emergency action plan as appropriate, based on what the emergency is. In the event that there's an emergency going on at a dam, and we feel that the owner's either ignoring the situation, unable to handle the situation, or unwilling to handle the situation, we have the authority to step in and take action in the event that there's not sufficient time to go through other enforcement channels. Basically, we have the authority to temporarily take the dam over until the dam is rendered in a safe condition, and then essentially return the dam to the owner. The takeover is a very temporary thing. It does not entirely relieve the owner of their legal liability, and the department retains the ability to back bill the owners later on for time and materials spent to render the dam safe. Hopefully this is something we won't have to use. Hopefully it's not something we use certainly very often, but it's something that could be very much needed in the case we had a dangerous situation at a dam, and we had particularly perhaps an owner that wasn't present, or an owner that wasn't able to take action. This kind of clarifies our ability to step in and hopefully protect public safety. So that gets us through through kind of in a nutshell, the administrative rules. As I said, those came into power in August of this year, and we're starting to work on the phase 2 of the rules, the standards rules. And so just want to talk a little bit about those. As we're kind of gearing up to get those standard rules in place, we're looking at a lot of different national dam safety guidance documents. We're looking at the dam safety rules of surrounding states to try to see what will really work here well in Vermont, what makes the most sense for us, while also doing the best we can to address public safety considerations. One of the things that we're looking at is the standards-based approach for dam safety versus, or in addition to, what's the kind of the newer way of looking at dam safety, which is a risk-informed decision-making approach. In the past, dams were regulated by a set of requirements or standards, and for a certain hazard class of the dam, there was a list of standards the dam had to meet. And if it didn't meet every single one of those requirements, it was out of compliance. And while that system still does have a lot of use in the dam safety world, and will be partly what the new rules will be about, the newer way of thinking, kind of the more current way of thinking, is using a risk-informed decision-making process where rather than comparing the dam necessarily to a static set of standards, it looks at the whole dam holistically, and it looks at within one certain dam, kind of what's the higher risk elements of the dam, what's the lower risk elements of the dam. If this caused an issue, could this cause a failure? Could it or could it not? Could it cause a full failure? And you kind of ask yourself all these questions about different elements of the dam, and it allows you to identify essentially the highest risk element of the dam, and that's really the most important thing that gets addressed. So while it may, in some cases, you may not meet the standard in every single part, it allows, certainly with limited funds, it allows you to focus the money and limited funds to address highest risk elements first, rather than just kind of going down a list of standards and blindly addressing them kind of as time and money allows. Perhaps addressing ones that are actually, while not meeting the standard, actually maybe lower risk or has a low probability, very low probability of happening, and meanwhile ignoring perhaps the higher probability deficiency. So that's probably one of the bigger topics that we need to tackle. It's also going to include some new dam and existing dam rehab design requirements, and that stuff around engineering topics like hydrology and hydraulics, geology and geotechnical requirements and structural requirements. Also going to have sections that talk about dam breach and dam removal requirements. We're going to hopefully clean up and improve our dam order application requirements. We're going to use the opportunity to require operation and maintenance manuals for dams. We're going to, we talked a lot about inspections. We're going to basically write the back end of what those inspection types really mean, what's actually required. We're going to probably build templates for the different inspection types. And then lastly, and probably most importantly almost, is emergency action planning requirements. Right now, or in the past, we had no requirement that dams have emergency action plans, and emergency action planning is such a critical component in dam safety. I went back to that slide at the very beginning where you saw those dams in the late 1800s and into the 1900s that certainly didn't have emergency action plans. Some of them resulted in many loss of life, and as time has gone on, the advent of emergency action plans, amongst other things, but has resulted in a lot better downstream notifications and evacuations that have saved lives. So emergency action plans are very important. I foresee requiring emergency action plans for all high hazard dams, and then also requiring probably a simplified version of the emergency action plan for significant hazard dams. So we've kind of started that initiative a little bit already, where we have a program called DSS Wise Light that we've obtained. It's a freeware program that was developed through FEMA that allows us to run fairly rapid dam breach analyses and develop flood inundation maps. And we're sort of using that for a couple of reasons. One is to help look at hazard classifications for dams, but it also is helping us to, as we start to determine the hazard classifications, we are developing these maps that ultimately we're hopeful that in some cases owners can even use those to help save money to ultimately use those inundation maps in their emergency action plans, at least for significant hazard dams. Probably not for high hazard dams are going to probably require a higher level of analysis, but that's at least where we're heading. Okay, so resources and future training. So I'm very thankful for Corey and Marie to kind of dream up the concept of this workshop. This kind of helped get us a little bit off, kind of get us going on the concept that we need to be doing more of this kind of outreach. And this is an example of hopefully more things to come statewide. In addition to we are planning on doing, as I kind of alluded to earlier, a second dam safety workshop where we have basically a statewide workshop where we present the standard rules when they're ready to the public before we enter the formal rulemaking process, and then also provide some dam safety education. I also foresee, of course, as we enter the formal rulemaking process, we'll have the formal hearings as we did last time, and hopefully they won't have to be telehearings, but who knows what 2022 will bring. Hopefully we'll be well past this. And I foresee the need and our planning for the future to have probably a good number of upcoming subject matter workshops as we start to develop our rules around the standards. For example, emergency action planning, I can foresee having workshop just simply with that topic only, where we start to really dive into the emergency action planning topic and talk about what our expectations are for emergency action planning, what our requirements are and best practices, and hopefully take some of the take that kind of on the road around the state. Eventually it'd be nice to think we get to a point where we're holding not just an educational informational meeting about emergency action plans, but maybe even doing dam specific or regional tests of emergency action plans where we, do mock events and learn a tremendous amount that way when you actually put these emergency action plans into action and learn that, some of these numbers don't really work, or this isn't the way we really do this, and this doesn't really make sense once rubber really hits the road, and so it allows the document to become a lot more accurate and a lot more useful. So again, I foresee a good number of subject matter workshops coming up, and there'll probably be ones on inspection as well, and other topics. So some other resources. I think I already had our website, but again, that's sort of where we post all of our information on the rulemaking process, and where you're going to start to see more and more over time about dam safety and about our program. In addition to the rule writing, we're also writing some fact sheets around different dam safety topics that in time we'll start to post on the website. Will hopefully help to continue to bridge the gap between us and dam owners and the public. The Association of State Dam Safety Officials, again, it's an organization that every state dam safety program in the country is a member of, and they have a website with a lot of great information. They have a section for owners and a section that provides a lot of good basic information about dam ownership, the risks of dam ownership, how to hire an engineer, a lot of good information there. And then there's obviously the federal dam safety guidance documents, and federal agencies like FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, and Bureau of Reclamation have volumes of guidance documents on every dam safety topic you can imagine, from emergency action planning to technical considerations, engineering, operations and maintenance recommendations, and on and on. And also dam removal. And here's some state and federal contacts here, I guess. For those not aware, there's a Vermont Dam Task Force, and that's a group that meets on roughly a quarterly basis or every few months, and they discuss dams throughout the state, potential dam removals, and kind of collaborate and work together to identify dams that whether that might pose a unacceptable safety risk or no longer serve a useful purpose and maybe have a major environmental impact. They help to target those projects and help to move those to a removal state. And there's a lot of different groups. I have probably not them all listed here. Marie can probably talk more about this than a lot more about this topic than I. And so I guess if Marie, you want to chime in talk about dam removal a little bit.
Well, if I can just give me a second. Hi, I'm Marie Caduto also with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Watershed Investment Division. Just a different piece of it on the planning program. And there, just so folks know, there are a number of both grant and loan programs to help folks through either the dam removal process or the dam rehabilitation process. I'll send Corey a list of those, which he can post on his website, so that you can find that and see what's available. Grants can be found for dam removal, but not for rehabilitation. So if you're interested in a dam removal, the organizations that Ben has listed here, and as well as Corey, the conservation districts, and there are quite a few organizations that will help you with the dam removal process. Trout Unlimited, the Nature Conservancy, certainly both the Vermont Department of Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are also very interested in assisting dam owners with removal. There are loans for rehabilitation. The state has a loan program for unsafe dams, which is both a low interest loan as well as percentages of that can be grants versus loans. So there are a number of permutations of different percentages that can be worked out for rehabilitating a dam that has been declared unsafe. That itself is a specific process. It's not for any dam out there. But if there is a problem with the dam and engineers think that that may have a failure potential, there is a loan program specifically for that purpose. If anyone's interested in dam removal, certainly they can contact Corey or myself. The Vermont Dam Task Force is out there, and we can put you in touch with folks who have those kind of resources to further dam removals. Certainly Ben's office would be the primary contact for a loan for rehabilitation of a dam. I think that's all I'm going to come up with for now, unless folks have questions.
Okay, thanks, Marie. I think that essentially brings me to the end as well. I'm willing to stay on and entertain questions or have a discussion.
Someone asked if you can make a donation to the Vermont Dam Task Force in exchange for maybe a patch or a t-shirt.
I don't think the Vermont Dam Task Force has a budget. Ben, do you know, or Ron, do you know if there's a budget for that organization? It's more a group of professionals.
Yeah, I defer to Ron. I don't believe they do, but I don't know that for sure. I've not seen any swag that they seem to have.
I love the idea though.
Yeah, me too. We'll get on it.
I'm going to post a link to a follow-up survey. If you have 2 minutes and want to give us some feedback on this this webinar, you can click on that link and do that. Are there other questions for Ben or Marie? You can type in the chat box.
Just wanted to say thank you for a very informative workshop. That was excellent. And if you can send that SurveyMonkey link to registrants by email, that would be great.
Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you all for participating.
Yeah,
Thank you for
absolutely.
putting
There's
it on.
interest out there.
Thanks everyone for their interest.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hey, Corey, will you share Ben's slides so that we can refer back to them?
Yep, I will. I'll send them
Great.
out via email, and I can also put them up on the website.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Ben, go home.
Well, go put my mask on before I go outside the room.
Thanks, Ben, very much, and Corey for pulling this together. It's